If you want to see more car content like this, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to visit our website to explore our curated inventory of luxury, classic, and investment grade cars.
So if you're a little kid in the 60s, somebody in the neighborhood had a station wagon. Somebody had a Ford, a Country Squire, somebody had a Caprice Estate Wagon, somebody had a Plymouth. It wasn't what I would have expected to be a collectible 50 years later, never mind something that might touch into the six figures one day. These things have gotten relatively hot. You've got guys turning these things into resto mods, putting big engines in, really trick chassis underneath. They're turning them into something that brings back their youth. And I'll tell you, I remember running around in the back seat, the very back seat of one of these with the guys that I played hockey with, the hockey gear back there. No seat belts, just running around like a madman. And every kid that grew up in the 60s remembers that same thing. So if I want my grandson to experience it, I thought I'd take him for a little drive around the parking lot before anybody gets upset I took him out on the street. He wasn't on the street. Just so one day he can experience and said, I was running around like my Opa was running around when he was a little kid. And like I said, I can't believe how collectible these station wagons have become. I mean, you've got the Griswolds, the family truckster, as they called it. You had the Brady Bunch that had the Plymouth. You had a couple of cool wagons from TV shows and movies, but I would have never have dreamt that they became this collectible. What makes this one so special is the fact that it's super original. Nobody parked these cars thinking they were going to be valuable. They were going to go to zero at some point. To find one in this sort of condition, 20,000 original miles, original paint, original interior, a 396, so somebody was towing something or somebody wanted some horsepower, air conditioning, power steering, disc brakes, the roof rack with the bumpers with the steps up, like such a cool car. This thing is really special, not because of what it is, because of its condition. Unheard of. Nobody parked these cars. So let's have a look at it and see what makes it so special. Well, like anything from the 60s or the early 70s, it's all about engine. A 396, 3¼ horse with factory air, pretty cool for one of these cars. I've seen a couple of these cars with 427s and sticks in it, ultra rare. And those things have become pretty collectible. This thing here, as far as the engine bay goes, untouched. A bunch of the original hoses, the original radiator, you know, just a super clean engine bay, all the original paint. You can see all the markings, all the original decals here. The hood under pad, you can see all the markings up here. Very cool piece of history. When you go to the interior of this car, all original seats, carpets, door panels, nothing has been touched on this. All the trim, the same thing. The paint, for a metallic, it's called Tripoli Turqoise, which was a K code with the wood trim. The paint is stunning for a car of this age, and especially for metallic, it's nice and even. You get to the back of it, and this is kind of the cool part. They had the factory luggage rack, and they had these little bumperettes so you could step up and put your luggage on here. Pretty cool piece. And of course, you had the power rear window, which allowed you to flip down the gate. And this is where, as a kid, I remember sitting in the back watching traffic coming at you. We didn't really wear seat belts. There were seat belts in the cars, but we never wore the seat belts. And I used to think, what if that guy doesn't stop when I was a little kid? It's hard to believe that these things might touch on six figures. We're seeing such a nostalgic yearning for those cars, where guys like me want to take my grandkids for a drive so they can experience what it was like to grow up in the 60s. Gary's going to take it for a drive. We'll see what he thinks. I remember these cars. I mean, yes, they were boats. They didn't have huge power, but it was still a 396 big block. But they were land yachts that just floated down the road. Let's see what Gary thinks.
What was essentially the minivan of the 60s, no one would have ever thought that the car would become a collector car. You know, it's such a utilitarian vehicle. It's you know, fits 9 people easily, and it probably oftentimes fit a lot more kids and hockey equipment and bikes on the roof rack and families going camping. You know, but this car specifically being, you know, a 21,000 original mile car, original paint, original engine, the big engine, the 396, the 325 horse, just kind of ticks all the boxes, making it a collector car. And let's face it, a lot of what has to do with a car being collectible is driven on nostalgia. And, you know, for anyone who was a kid in the late 60s, early 70s, there's a lot of nostalgia. I'm sure a lot of hours spent in cars like this, in a car just like this for a lot of people. You know, sitting backwards, looking out the rear window on a road trip, or going to baseball practice, or going to hockey games. For someone getting the opportunity to buy, you know, a fully loaded, great original car that reminds them of their childhood, it makes sense that a car like this might break 6 figures. And of course, this car having all the bells and whistles, being the 2nd gen Caprice, they wanted to make this, you know, the luxury wagon. So the rear window is a power window. You've got the power steering, very nice option on a car like this. Power brakes, power disc brakes. You've got all your climate control, air conditioning, factory air conditioning car. Very nice on a summer road trip. You've got your 8-track, you've got your AM FM radio. You know, pretty much all the bells and whistles that you could get in 1968. So standard on these cars was the 327. This car being a 396, certainly got enough power. And let's face it, these cars were meant for stuffing as much as you could in it, whether it be 9 people, you know, plus luggage on the roof, or again, a bunch of, you know, sports equipment for taking the kids or half the team to practice or games. Yeah, this car being the 396, 325 horse, it's got a lot of snot. Nice 3-speed automatic transmission. This car drives beautifully, very comfortable. I mean, you know, it's not going to snap to attention around any corners exactly, but it slowly follows where your hands go. It's and looking at this car, I mean, I've got 2 little kids now. I couldn't imagine putting them in the back seat facing backwards with with literally 0 protection from a rear end collision. But when you think about it, 1968 is 57 years ago. So I'm sure in 68 this car felt like state of the art, ultra safe, big boat. Because you think about it, you extrapolate 57 years before that is the turn of the century. And yeah, those Model Ts and Mercedes cars were certainly not safe. You know, and really, you always say, a great car to go get ice cream in, but this is really a great car to take half the kids on the block to go get ice cream in. We'll pull into the gas station here, fill her up with, say, the highest level octane they have. Getting the full experience here. Those numbers would have looked a little bit different in 1968. Something driving a car like this that I've always got to remind myself is that it's a real privilege to drive a completely original car that's never been taken apart, because you get the driving experience that was this car when it was new, when it was 5 years old, when it was 10 years old. You know, it's never been apart, it drives, it's got all those characteristics of exactly as the car left the factory. You know, how the steering feels, how the brakes feel, just kind of your overall performance of the car. You know it's the factory performance. This is very cool, very usable car. You know, something I could take home, and I could use this car all week. It's got enough room in it. The drivability is clearly there. I mean, plenty of power, plenty of stopping power. Falling more and more in love with this car as I drive it. Now that I've driven for the first time a 68 Caprice, the estate wagon, we've got to ask ourselves the question, do you need a car like this? Well, it's funny because in 1968, 1970, 1975 even, a lot of people did need a car like this. You know, it was a utility vehicle. If you had 5 kids playing hockey, baseball, soccer, whatever, if you went on family vacations, yeah, you needed a station wagon like this. But today, no, you don't need a car like this. But do you want a car like this? I want a car like this. And I think a lot of people who grew up in that era have a lot of nostalgia for cars like this. So yeah, you do. You want a car like this.